Hey everyone, and welcome back to World Traveler Cooking. I wanted to give an update because previously I did this series on diabetes and I wanted to give an update on my own condition. Now, this is partly going to be a discussion of how I got to where I got and also sort of the things that have helped me get there that maybe other diabetics, since I was diagnosed with diabetes for a while, may not have in their favor. So one thing that I would hope people would get out of this is that in some ways it was extremely lucky to be able to have the outcome that I had, as well as quite diligent about certain things. I've met people who are struggling with diabetes who frankly have done much better than anybody in their own families, but have still continually worsened. Sometimes there are odds that you can't beat. But my blood sugar is now back solidly in the pre-diabetic range. And it's in the pre-diabetic range pretty much no matter what I eat, which is good. I'm no longer having observable visceral sugar spikes that I can feel and detect. And but I haven't quite gotten everything all the way back down into the normal range. So things are getting better. They haven't gotten all the way better. So as many of you know, a couple of years ago, would it be a couple of years ago? I think it'd be like about a year, about 2 years or so ago, I experienced a massive overstress environment when I was working at a previous employer, in that case, Adjust GmbH, which was later purchased by Apple. The problems here were, of course, me being in middle management were partly of my own making, partly in relation to my work environment. So, of course, part of the blame, of course, has to go to me. But the end result of it was a series of health breakdowns, both physical health breakdowns and cognitive breakdowns. I wouldn't call what I went through a mental health problem per se, but it got to the point where I sought medical help primarily because I eventually learned that the memory problems I was having were probably stress related. And then I was told, well, you have high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol, and blood sugar bordering on diabetes. So that was that. My blood sugar control continued to degrade the next 3 months after I quit my job and focused primarily on stress reduction. I then went to work for another company, and actually there didn't have overstress problems at all. But my blood sugar control didn't improve. I went on metformin. So I guess it would be a year and a half ago. I went in to see the doctor the first time. 3 months after that, my blood sugar, my A1C had gone from 6.5 to 6.8. This would have put me within the diagnostic criteria of diabetic within American standards, but I was in Germany at the time, and in my age range, they typically don't diagnose until you're above 6.8. So at that point I was actually on the border. My doctor, of course, had said, oh, you're diabetic, but I hadn't crossed the threshold at that point. That was this. Then I went on metformin. 3 months later, my A1C had reached 7.0. I got a letter from my insurer saying you have diabetes and please be careful because all these other health problems come from. Um, at that point, by that point, I was involved in heavy exercise, and had started to walk, had extended my walk from a couple of kilometers a day all the way to 11, 12 kilometers almost every day. Eventually moved here to Indonesia, left that job, now I work somewhere else. And in the process, I haven't had an A1C test now since March, so that's about 9 months now. I could have had one just before I left. It would have probably also, I'm guessing, been around 7. Once I got here in Indonesia, I shifted my exercise routines around a bit. I'm working entirely from home, so I don't actually have to commute to work. But I am, again, continuing to walk around 10 kilometers a day. So I haven't had an A1C test for a while, so I don't actually know where that is. What I do know is that since I've started testing my blood sugar most days, it's been right about in the middle of the pre-diabetic range for fasting blood sugar. Most mornings, before I exercise, before I eat, etc. So that's all positive. What I want to kind of get into here is how I got to where I'm at. I think this is sort of the important point here. I adopted several important things. The first was restricting both carbohydrates and proteins for a while. Now I don't restrict them anymore, and my blood sugar is still roughly, as I say, in the middle of the pre-diabetic range, coupled with massive exercise. And the whole point here was to drain easy sources of sugar from my body in terms of what I was eating and in terms of short-term energy storage in the liver. So my mental model for the illness, looking back at all of my experiences, is that you have two interlocking systems in the body which can get out of whack, and either one of these can cause blood sugar control problems, and usually when one of them gets out of whack, the other one ends up out of whack too. The first of these is the insulin resistance subsystem of the body. This is mostly controlled with cortisol, although I'm sure there are other hormones at play. And then the second one is the liver glucose buffering system. I'll mention both of these together. I've done an episode on the relationship between cortisol and diabetes. I'd suggest watching it at this point to understand that side. The other side is that the liver can store a lot of blood sugar and then convert it into glycogen, which can then be rapidly turned back into glucose and dumped into the blood. One of the things that I think was giving me problems before was that when I would commute to work, I would very oftentimes walk as fast as I could, sort of speed walk, to the train station, hoping that I could catch a slightly earlier train. That's needless stress, coupled with some, higher load physical activity. And that was actually very oftentimes where I would experience sugar spikes that I could feel. These would get lower with metformin, but I had problems there. And by the way, I'm also most of the time not taking metformin either, unless I have serious reasons to think that stress or exercise is not happening the way it needs to. I control things almost exclusively through exercise and stress management. And then trying to eat a sane and balanced diet rather than a heavily restricted diet. So that was, I think, one of the things that was causing problems was, needless and useless stress tied to, higher calorie load physical activity in short times. Because very oftentimes I would get those blood sugar spikes, like on my way to work or on my way home. The second thing is, what I noticed that if I weighed myself in the morning, if I was sort of in the lower half of my weight range, then I could eat, say, a scoop of ice cream before my evening 10 or 11 kilometer walk. I wouldn't have problems, but if my weight was in the upper end, I couldn't without serious blood sugar spikes that I could feel. So this told me that part of the problem that I was experiencing was what I've come to call sort of full gas tank syndrome. In other words, your liver can kind of function like a gas tank. It holds into it can basically store all this glycogen, and then if you have too much glycogen and you need to release glycogen, it will release more than might be good. So once I got to Indonesia, I turned a lot of my exercises around. I really focused on emptying the gas tank, if you will, trying to consume all of the energy that was stored up in the liver, trying to reduce my dependence on or the utility of that sugar. So began walking before breakfast every day. And usually it's 9-10 kilometers in the morning walk before breakfast. Asking myself, do I really want that dessert? Do I really want, that rice? Do I, all the rest of these things I cut down in significant ways. Trying to make sure that I'm eating a sane and balanced diet. And people think, oh, well, if you just eat lots of protein and no carbohydrates, that'd be better. The problem is you have two fundamental problems with a high protein diet. The first is that your liver will convert the proteins into sugars, and then they'll store it in glycogen. You still get the same problem. The second problem is that process produces a lot of ammonia compounds, which get turned into urea, and it puts a lot of stress on your kidneys. So what I've come to do is to plan the amount of carbohydrates that I eat around my expected calorie load. In other words, if I'm not expecting to walk, then I just simply don't eat carbohydrates for that day, and I cut down everything else I eat appropriately. The second, those are basically the things there. And then again, if I'm under serious stress, that's going to cause insulin resistance. I take metformin. I can only take metformin 2 days in a row right now, because if I take it on the third day, then because it reduces the amount of sugar that the liver can release, then on the third day I start having exercise problems. So if I'm picking metformin, it's only for up to 2 days in a row. And it's usually stress related when I have to take it. What this means is my metformin prescription will probably last me quite a while. And I don't take it very often anymore. Things that helped me get to where I'm at now, which might not be available to others. First of all, I had a clear root cause here. Okay, most diabetics I think don't. it was clear to me that this was work stress related, and consequently I could get rid of the root cause before I dealt with anything else. I don't think you can overestimate that. Even with that, it took me 2 years to get back into the pre-diabetic range. Secondly, I don't have any family history of diabetes, so my body is probably, certainly on the better and more robust side in relation to this illness. Maybe there are others that will do me. But that I don't think you can overstate the importance of that either. If you have family history of diabetes, you're much more likely to get it, and it suggests that your body has more tendencies towards these sorts of problems, at least in our current system. So I'm thankful that I managed to get as far as I have. I plan to continue to work, and hopefully blood sugar levels will return to absolute normal levels. But that is taking quite a lot of time. Anyway, I figure I owed everybody an update on this. Wanted to say thanks to everybody for well wishes and concerns, and hope you all have a great new year.